like I was really.
You know, I'm so glad I never got involved with you. I just would have ended up being some woman you had to get up out of bed and leave at 3 o'clock in the morning and go clean your andirons. And you don't even have a fireplace. Not that I would know this.
Why are you getting so upset? This is not about you.
Yes, it is. You are a human affront to all women, and I am a woman.
Hey, I don't feel great about this, but I don't hear anyone complaining.
Of course not. You're out the door too fast.
I think they have an okay time.
How do you know?
I mean, how do I know? I know.
Because they...
Yes, because they...
How do you know that they're really...
What are you saying? That they fake orgasm?
It's possible.
Get out of here.
Why? Most women at one time or another have faked it.
Well, they haven't faked it with me.
How do you know?
Because I know.
Oh. Right. That's right. I forgot. You're a man.
What is that supposed to mean?
Nothing. It's just that all men are sure it never happened to them, and most women at one time or another have done it, so you do the math.
You don't think that I can tell a difference?
No.
Get out of here.
Ooh. Oh. Ooh.
Are you okay?
Oh. Oh, God. Ooh. Oh, God. Oh. 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 Oh, God. Oh, yeah, right there. Oh. 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 Oh, God. Oh. Yes. 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 Oh. 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 Oh, God. Oh.
I'll have what she's having.
Joe, Steve said, what a start. I don't know what my favorite part was, but it was kind of a bit disturbing at the same time watching those two characters, especially Netanyahu, but the Ayatollah little cameo I thought was lovely. Anyway, well done, Joe. All right, welcome to the Shit Show. My name's Andrea Edwards.
I am David Coe.
Still standing silence.
To think for a moment there. It was just a shock of watching Harry and Sally.
I am Richard Basilato. I'm confined to the penalty corner of bottom left as usual.
And my name is Joe Augustin. And once again, good afternoon and welcome to The Shit Show, the weekly gathering where we attempt to understand the world's problems before they become tomorrow's even bigger problems. Now, this week, we're tackling El Niño, which is apparently not just a weather pattern, but increasingly, it feels like an Amazon Prime subscription for floods, droughts, crop failures, shipping disruptions, heat waves, and fresh reasons to stare blankly into the middle distance. Scientists call El Niño a climate phenomenon. The rest of the world call it a what now? We'll also be taking a scenic tour of the polycrisis if we have time, which is a wonderful academic term meaning everything is on fire at the same time. Oceans are warming, glaciers are melting, parts of Asia are already feeling like the inside of an air fryer. And somewhere out there, there's a climate scientist publishing a paper titled, Actually, We're Fucked. It's Worse Than We Thought. Thankfully, we're inviting someone today who understands all of this because you watched the show before. You'll know that my qualifications extend roughly to reading what you find a hopefully funny introduction, putting my mouth in my foot in my mouth on DEI, and occasionally understanding that weather is not the same as climate. Our guest today is one of those rare people who can look at the ocean's atmosphere, currents, heat flows, and planetary systems and somehow make sense of the whole picture. He proudly embraces his status as Earth System nerd, which is fortunate because somebody has to do the homework while the rest of us are posting on social media and wondering why it's hotter and hotter every year. It's our pleasure here at the Shit Show to welcome the man who understands our water planet far better than most of us ever will, Jan Umsonst.
Hello, thanks for this introduction. But I'm not so sure. But I'm working on the understanding part for sure.
No, you certainly do. So,
nice to meet you.
Yeah, it's really great to have you here, Jan. So we tried to get you on a little while ago. We got the timing confused. So we're really happy to have you back, especially because just yesterday was when NOAA declared, and now the El Niño has officially begun. Although I heard that BOM in Australia, the British, I don't know what is it, the Bureau of Meteorology, sorry, they wait for it to get to 0.8 degrees Celsius before they declare it. So it's not declared officially in Australia yet, but the rest of the world is now officially into a new El Niño. So, yeah, it's not good news.
No, it's
worrisome.
Now, before we kick off, Jan, would you mind? I'll feature you, but would you mind telling everyone the story of how you became the climate systems nerd? Because it was a choice.
It was a choice.
Yeah.
I heard in the year 2007 that the oceans are acidifying from the new IPCC report, and I realized what oceans are acidifying, and I was clear that this is important, and since then I wanted to understand. And so since 20 years, I try to understand the changes in the Earth system. And always, if I encountered a new discussion, I did it via studies, actually, not via YouTube videos or some articles from someone, but I did it via the peer review process and studied the discussions to base my positions on the discussions, on the observations, and what we find out. And with time, I understood more and more of the systems that contribute to Earth system changes. And so I developed an overview on the system with the years. So it's highly fascinating actually how Earth functions. And it's actually an oscillatory system. It oscillates. And that's maybe the most important part of Earth. And El Niño is an ocean atmosphere oscillation.
Yeah.
In the middle of the Earth system in the tropical Pacific. So it makes it so important.
Yeah. All right. So when I first, there you go. When I first talked to you, which was December last year, you took us right back to that beginning point, which was the water planet. So, when we talked, you were talking about you just couldn't believe how we could acidify the entire ocean, and that was your 20-year journey that you didn't realize would take you 20 years. So, but let's start there, because you published a piece on LinkedIn yesterday. It's I'll add it in the comments, a short of what it means to cool down a water planet, and I thought there were some really key points that you included there that people should understand this, because I get frustrated when I hear climate scientists saying if we just do this, we'll stop warming up, because that's not my understanding of what's happening. We're in we might be able to bring things back, but it's not going to happen instantly. So should we start there with the water planet?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, Earth is a water planet that changed the game. If we would live on a rock planet, totally different story with global warming. But if you heat up a water planet, it means you heat up the oceans. The oceans are like a heat storage device that accumulates heat from a sun. This means the energy involved are just waste. We are like ants compared to these energies which are involved in global warming. This means the oceans accumulate each year waste amounts of energy, and it's accelerating. So we have now, if you just take the mean values from 1958 to 1981, compared to the last heat increase in 25, we increased heat uptake by 8 times. This means the mean value is about 2.9 zetajoules, a number with 21 zeros. And in 24, we reached 24 zetajoules. This means 8 times the rate we had in the 50s to 80s. And that's an astonishing acceleration. And the question is, how will it evolve in the future? And also, the maximum heat uptake rates happen during a neutral to weak La Nina, but the maximum rates should happen during a very strong La Nina. These are the phases where the Earth system takes up heat, it accumulates more because the tropical Pacific becomes colder, and El Niños discharge the heat. So La Niñas lead to faster acceleration, El Niños discharge the heat. This means the acceleration of ocean heat is strongly coupled with El Niños. So they release part of the heat that was previously accumulated. And that makes these El Niños so dangerous because they increase the heat content in the atmosphere via increases in water vapor and condensation, which releases heat to the atmosphere. And this increases the kinetic energy in the atmosphere. So air currents and high and low pressure systems intensify. So the whole system gets supercharged by an energy discharge from the oceans to the atmosphere. That's El Niños, actually. But it goes a little bit on, but this was just a short explanation why water planets are different and highly problematic if you heat them too fast. Just the last point, a Union of Concerned Scientists just released a statement that we overheat the oceans, and the oceans will not be ignored. This means Union of Concerned Scientists also hits now or hits now down on the subject because we're heating the planet way too fast.
Yeah, I'm just looking for the articles to share. So first of all is yours. So one of the things you were talking about, because what people don't seem to understand is warming is energy, right? So it needs to be dispersed, right? So you're saying that's what relates. But even if we drop warming, it's still going to stay high. Why is it going to continue to stay high?
One thing, I mean, we can reduce the warming via aerosol dimming. I mean, we spread aerosol in the atmosphere, incoming sunlight is reduced, let's say by more clouds or by more aerosols in the stratosphere, depends on the method you apply. But the problem you have the energy in the oceans. And to cool down a water planet substantially, you need oceans to lose heat. And the only way the oceans can lose heat is via the atmosphere or through the atmosphere to space. And that's the problem. And it's by no way clear in how far we can cool down the planet without the oceans starting to counter the cooling because they start to release more heat. And first papers coming now out, and the discussion is slowly getting momentum. So it's fully open to what degree we can cool down the climate because we have an ocean with too much heat. And it covers 3/4 of the surface, so it's very easy to understandable that there could exist a problem. How large it is, we will see what papers will find out, but it's not so simple to cool down the planet just by reducing incoming sunlight.
Yeah.
So
All
it's open.
Yeah. David, you were nodding. Do you want to add something?
I was going to say, the heat capacity of water is much greater than rocks, basically. So the amount of heat you have to warm up water by 1 degree is multiple times the heat you need to warm up rocks by 1 degree. So which means that when the oceans give the heat back out, you're going to find that for each degree of worth of heat, you actually get multiple degrees of warming on the planet we live on. So that's the problem that Jan's pointing out. You have the fact that this massive store of heat is going to create multiple degrees more for each degree of heat it gives out equivalently.
Yeah.
So the fact that the oceans are warming is a real problem because it says you're storing enough heat there to boil the rocks.
I can give one number. One number I can give, highly interesting. There exists one paper from, I think was one university in London. They gave a paper on ocean warming in 2014 or 16 when they had this strong El Nino, and they calculated it. The heat uptake from the 50s to 2010 or something like that would have been enough to warm the lower atmosphere by 36 degrees. I mean, that's numbers we are playing here with. They are tremendous. And this would never happen. But the oceans have the capability to heat up the atmosphere more if they release more heat. So just a fraction of it. And the problem is, while the ocean, the heating of the atmosphere is just 1 to 2% of the total heat accumulation, of which 90% goes in the oceans. And the heat content in the atmosphere increased via global warming by 5 jettajoules. Just in 25, we increased by 24 jettajoules in the oceans. So 5 times what the atmosphere accumulated in heat through all these decades. So it's really waste numbers you're playing here with. So it's far from clear how the system reacts if we cool down the ocean, the surface air temperature via solar dimming. So this has to be, we have really to go into it. We need high resolution models with historical heat uptake patterns to simulate how the system reacts actually if we cool it down. To which point can we cool it down? Because it's clear that we cannot indefinitely cool it down via clouds, because the oceans will have a say into it. The question is by how far, by how much, where are the thresholds? And it's far too early just to say we can any time we can cool down the climate and solve the problem. It's not like that. So
it's a big. So one of the things that I read that was in the Union of Concerned Scientists about the fact that the amount of heat would have increased temperatures by 36 degrees Celsius. So when we're talking about 1.5, they're talking about 36. Why hasn't that happened? And obviously the oceans are part of that. But the heat and the energy's in there. So and more and more is being released, or it's getting hotter and hotter. So what's stopping that 36 degrees?
I mean, the 36 degrees anyway, just theoretical number. In practical plans, never can happen nearly close, because oceans store heat in the interior. So this heat has to reach the atmosphere, and for that you need mixing processes. So it cannot happen that the oceans just release all the heat. It's impossible. But they can increase the rate of heat release via evaporation at the ocean surface. They need to, water has to evaporate to water vapor, though the oceans lose effectively heat. And so it's mixing processes, and where the oceans store heat, that's the main issue here. And what we observe is the oceans accumulate heat across the mid-latitudes. A majority of the heat uptake happened there, and this heat uptake happens in the upper 300 to upper 700 meters, most of it. And you get warm blobs of water below the surface, which are growing and warming and in part freshening. They get lighter even because of saltiness changes. And in mid-latitudes, you have the phenomenon, you have seasons. You have summer seasons with now extensive marine heat waves, where the oceans accumulate more heat because you have no cloud cover. They evaporate, or high pressure systems remove cloud cover. Ocean surfaces heat up during summer. It's a very strong signal we have now. But during winter, you have the time of winter storms. And they use the heat in the oceans to get stronger. So the heat allows them to get stronger. They mix further down the water to the upper mixed layer and bring up heat to the surface. And we have now the first signals that the mid-latitude winter seasons release now more heat to the atmosphere. It's kind of feedback that's now starting. And the question is how it will evolve in the future if we even accelerate more. And it looks not good. If we continue our course, we will reach extinction level territory, because water planets are to be taken seriously. It's not the game anymore. And currently it's not clear how the system will further react, because we have various vicious cycles now becoming operational in the system. And one of the main vicious cycles, which is not clear how strong it is because it's all aerosols play into a role, it's ocean surfaces heating up, And warmer ocean surfaces reduce cloud cover, which leads then to a higher heat accumulations of the oceans. And this is part of the story why heat accumulation accelerates. Another problem is the acceleration takes part mostly in the southern hemisphere, but the aerosol changes, which could also be responsible for it, take part mostly in the northern hemisphere. So it does not really add up, and it's only difficult to separate natural cloud feedbacks driven by higher surface temperatures, driven by circulation changes like storm tracks that move poleward, or like intertropical convergence zone which contracts and produces stronger extreme precipitation events, and to what extent aerosols reduce cloud cover. It's very difficult to separate, but if you look at the spectral patterns where clouds decline, where heat waves are forming, and that is happening in both hemispheres, our main problem is likely that we trigger a self-amplifying feedback and not reduced aerosols, which contribute to this feedback. They masked it to some extent, but the feedback, that's the main problem we have, and this becomes now operational, as it seems. And we have no idea in how far non-linearities are involved, because cloud feedback over the oceans has a strong spectral pattern. This means we have low marine cloud deck regions. They are off the west coast of the continents, where the oceans have an extensive cloud cover, low cloud cover. And in this region, we see now the last years a massive heat waves developing, and these heat waves reduce cloud cover in these regions. And this leads also to higher energy uptake in these regions, which worsens the problem again. And these heat waves are very bad signals because the newest, just another side aspect, we have the Planck feedback, which cools Earth. The Planck feedback means you increase surface temperatures by a degree, and outgoing long-wave radiation increases that reduces the temperature increase at the surface. So it does not go up so fast, so high. But now we observe the last years that the Planck feedback, the outgoing long-wave radiation to space, is not increasing as much as we modeled it that it would do. And likely one reason is reductions in these cloud cover regions, because you get higher sunlight incoming, because lesser clouds, more heat accumulation on surface temperature acceleration, but compared to that, not a comparable increase in long wave radiation. So this is also not clear now the last 10 years or last 15 years how this signal will develop. Is it a short-term signal variation, or is it also another feedback or a reduced negative feedback? Because the Planck feedback increasing long wave radiation to space is the strongest, it's the only cooling mechanism of Earth, and it's the strongest negative feedback that reduces surface warming. Also, just another tip in the scale. We have now so many question marks with high-level discussions, which look very, very worrisome. And now we have the prospect of a super El Nino. Earth, are you kidding me? I mean, yeah. I really hope that would not happen. I did not believe it, because I thought, no, that's not possible, because this would mean we enter now extinction level territory. This means the prospect of a super El Nino this early. It was projected to happen in decades from now on, but not, and that's the main thing. We had in 2023, 2024, Eastern El Nino, a strong one. The eastern ones are the strong one, warming pattern, mostly in the Eastern El Nino, spreading into the Eastern Pacific, spreading into the Central Pacific. And just 2 years later, we have the possibility of a super El Nino. This does not fit in the historical pattern. Central El Ninos, which are weaker, which happen in the Central Pacific, they should increase in frequency, but not the strong El Ninos. These shouldn't. But we have now this prospect, and this prospect of a super El Nino, the only reason, just to finish it, is because we have so much heat under the surface of the oceans. And in 2014, this did not happen. But in 25, then the big El Nino came. So this means the heat is there for a super El Nino. It will happen likely the next years or this year. And that's just madness. It's climate madness.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to, I like to ask stupid questions, right? So the first one is, I'll give you a break. So one of the things I've always said when I've been sort of studying the whole climate and how it all makes sense, and obviously I don't understand it at the level that you do from a scientific perspective. I'm just understanding it as much as I can, right? The biggest gap I've always seen is how much we don't know. So there's what we do know, and there's all the what we don't know. And there's a lot of reasons for the we don't knows, and it's government funding it, but it's also technological capability or enough power to do the research. And then we've got the Trump administration ripping up things like, you know, the ocean monitoring system. But the other thing that you were talking about, which I think would be important for people to understand, is why do we have less cloud cover? So the first question is, what's that status as far as what we do know and what we don't know and why? But the other one is, why do we have less cloud cover? Help people understand that.
It's a mix of everything.
Yeah.
One thing is important to understand is that the cloud feedback, we started to observe it, or studies started to observe it in the 80s, when we still increased aerosol emissions. And also studies in the 2000s, after 2000 started to come, that we have a cloud feedback. And but also you have to aerosol emissions, SOx emissions, sulfur emissions, they increase cloud cover, they increase cloud nucleus. So these aerosols on which water condenses, so they increase these cloud droplets that leads to longer lasting clouds and brighter clouds and a larger cloud cover. This we reduce climate warming while increasing aerosol emissions, but increase cloud cover. That's inside the signal. And we started in the 70s, 80s, SOx emissions were reduced by the industrial states, North America and Europe. And then later, India and China and Asia started to accelerate their economic output, and they increased massively their SOx emissions. This led then from the 90s to the 2010 to again an increase in aerosol emissions. But from the 2010s, overall emissions declined actually by half, from 120 million tons per year to about 60 million tons, a little bit rising again. So reduced aerosol emission by half. And now we have a problem to separate them. What is cloud feedback and what is the feedback via aerosols, or to what extent declining aerosol emissions reduce cloud cover? They did so in a substantial amount, that's for sure, because aerosol emissions are quite effective in producing cloud cover. But you have lots of other mechanisms that also contribute to reducing cloud cover. And this is, for example, the circulation changes. We have storm tracks, they are moving poleward. This means they contract, they get slimmer, and this reduces cloud cover. This is one. The other one is that the intertropical convergence zone, this rain band around the tropics, is also contracting, reduces also cloud cover. Other things we have is spreading droughts and heat waves and drying out continents, declining relative humidity over the continents, reduces also cloud cover. Then we have the spreading of marine heat waves, very strong temperature anomalies. They evaporate clouds, lower clouds, because the latent heat, upward radiation from higher surface temperatures, they evaporate this cloud, these raindrops, these small cloud drops. Yeah, because it's very simple. You take a heating device and have some water somewhere, you evaporate it again. And so higher surface temperatures in mid-latitudes reduce cloud covers. By higher surface temperatures in the tropics, they lead to a higher agglomerization of convective systems. They get stronger and more clustered, which reduces the surrounding low cloud cover. Also a mechanism that comes now operational in the tropics. So we have a cloud feedback from the tropics to the mid-latitudes, while clouds are increasing in the pole regions, where clouds contribute to the warming, but not cooling it. Because in the polar regions, we need heat to reach space and then suppress outgoing long wave radiation. So we have over most of the planet cloud feedback that warms additionally the climate, and big problem.
So adding sulfur's not going to fix it.
That's a good question.
Oh.
I
Might help a
we
little
can-
bit, but
Yeah, we can bring down the temperatures for sure. 1 degree, maybe 1.5. But when starts the oceans to counter it is fully not clear, but there will be a connection. And the other thing is we have now 1.5 degree of warming, being 1.39 was the latest assessment and mean value. But the problem is now we have now a super El Nino, a prospect. We have maybe also, in addition to reduced aerosol emissions, we have a cloud feedback. We have nonlinear expansion of marine heat wave over the oceans with very strong signals. Now it's a vicious cycle likely between upper oceans and atmosphere feedbacks driving these marine heat waves. And so it's by far not clear how the warming rate will continue, because that's the main point with this, with one of the main points of the super El Nino. We had global warming happens now in temperature jumps. After the hiatus from 2000 to 2012, global temperatures were increasing slowly. And then then came a large temperature jump from 2012 to 2016 with an El Nino involved in the later period, which increased the temperatures by 0.4 degrees from the mean values, from the annual value in 2012. So we had from 2012 a jump by 0.4, a little bit decline, and 2020 again, same than 2016. Then 3 years of La Nina, a little bit declining temperatures, and then 2023, 2024, another jump by 0.4 from the temperature level 222. And now, just two years later, we have the prospect of a super El Nino. This means we can have another temperature jump. And that's crazy acceleration it would mean. But here something is very important. In the past, El Nino, the warming effect, purely via El Nino were the main reason temperatures increased during El Ninos. But this changed. During 2012, 2014 or 2015 to 2016, the El Nino, the extra El Nino component of the warming was growing. It was mostly ocean temperatures and poleward heating that contributed to the El Nino warming. And in 2023, 2024, this El Nino was, from a heat release perspective, a weak to moderate one. Because in the central to eastern El Nino, the heat release was not too large. But other systems started to contribute strongly. This was very strong convection and heat release in the Western Pacific and the Caribbean Sea, which accumulated heat, and a strong poleward intensification of warming, and a strong drought and heat wave expansion. Subtropical dry zones expansion also contributed to this warming jump during these times. Additionally, with this large jump in marine heat wave expansion and persistent intensity, in 2023, the ocean surface temperatures in the last 6 months jumped by 0.3 degrees. That's massive. Normally, we have a decadal increase by 1.1 degree, 0.1 degree, 0.11 degree, and we had 0.3 degrees in just 6 months in 2023. And since then, ocean surface temperatures, would say, did not decline. And this signal is very, very serious. Ocean surface temperatures should decline after El Ninos. This is what we know. But they did not do it. This means this feedback driving marine heat wave expansion, which drives now the sea surface temperature accelerations, are now so strong that they are stronger than the ENSO cycle. Driving as it stays, dropping again, driving. No, they persisted. And this is like a regime shift of how the system operates now, what we observe now. And how these feedbacks will further evolve is not really clear, but it seems to be non-linear feedbacks with thresholds involved. And if marine heat waves jumped to such an extent, while greenhouse gases in the atmosphere also jumped in 2024 with 3.7 ppm degrees, just astonishing increase jump, and ocean heat uptake also accelerates to new max values. It's why should we assume that this marine heat wave expansion, this long linear increase, stops now? We will be idiots. So we have to assume it will further intensify, and this means we are now in extinction level territory. If the precautionary principle is applied, because we cannot prove it. Science is not able to prove it.
Yeah.
We can,
And why can't science prove it?
because it's too complex. We would need better models. We know, and also scientific proof in a consensus principle means there are no studies saying no, it's still not right, it's maybe this or that. So all questions have to be solved. Criticizing or showing weaknesses in the theory that this is not the case. But the problem is this feedback operates via the surface oceans, via the upper ocean column, water column, via the atmosphere, via sea ice losses, polar changes, and continental changes, surface atmosphere connections. So the feedback is a planetary feedback with dozens of systems involved. And this makes it impossible to prove that it will gonna to happen. The science cannot. So we would have to act as a precautionary principle. You have to apply it, and we would have to act. But we will act if, and this will be likely the case, that global warming will further accelerate the next years, then we will know. The system will show us, as we have here with vicious cycle going on. If so, it will further accelerate.
Yeah. All right. So, David, you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I want to sort of summarize a bit of what Jan's been saying. I think the basic thing is that the oceans warm up. What happens out of it is that it's not uniform. It's not linear in a way. It kind of like bunches up, and you get this bunching of effects that happens along. So imagine if your radiator got really hot, which is kind of like what it is, because inside the radiator is a lot of water. And you accidentally tap your hand on it when it got really hot, you get a very different reaction to when it wasn't so hot. And as you go along and you bunch up in that way, someone may be standing by you, may bump along, and so on. And that's the problem about science, is that it's like, supposing that you had a group of people who can go into a casino and you kind of gave them a way in which they can all cheat in that way in the games. The casino is going to watch each game separately. And the only way they can really prove that there's this bunch of people doing that is after the fact, when they've already taken all the money. And that's the problem.
Good analogy.
The way science works is that it can only prove it after the fact, which is pretty pointless, really useless for us, which is kind of the common on precautionary principle.
Yeah.
That's the thing, huh?
All right, Joe Richard.
Yeah, I get it. And, in my simple world, I kind of translate it into what I've spent the last 35 years doing, which is kind of manage financial risk. And non-linearity is not good because it really complicates matters. But most people, even and certainly in the financial space, always assume some form of linearity because it makes their life much easier. And then they're surprised and shocked when it doesn't happen that way. Non-linearity is just uniformly bad for risks because it makes them impossible to measure or calculate and have some kind of reasonable forewarning of what your worst outcome might be, because it's impossible to tell.
Actually, you know what, Richard? You just reminded me. What we are at is like there's this thing called a reverse knockout. One of these non-linear kind of bets that you can have in finance world, and used to do a lot of those things, which basically says along the way you make money until you get so far that you completely go bankrupt. And this is a bet you put on because you can say, oh, it's never going to get there, basically. In that way. And a lot of our effort is like that. We're actually increasing the heating in a lot of our efforts by having more activities and more push and more urgency to do this and to do that to try and fix it. But that's actually storing up even more heat.
Yeah.
in there. And it gets to a point where it gets to be at that knockout. And so we're reaching that knockout in that way. So it is like Richard. And the thing about reverse knockouts is they are horrible to risk manage. Effectively, the best way to risk manage those is don't ever get into them.
Yes.
All right. So I just want to, just before we go on to, we keep going with El Nino, because I think let's really go down this path. And we will give people hope at some point, right? Even though I hate the word hope within this context, because I think it's hope without action. The required scale of action is just bullshit as far as I'm concerned. But one of the big stories that's constantly in the news is the AMOC. And I know when you're sitting in the Northern Hemisphere, that's a popular story. It's still a 2100 story. It drives me nuts. Yeah, and when we spoke 6 months ago, you basically said, "Don't worry about it." And a couple of shows ago, I said with us, I said, "I'm not concerned about the AMOC because I'm going to be long dead from extreme heat before that happens." Have you changed your mind on the AMOC or this El Nino supercharging everything? I mean, one of the things that's happening in Pakistan is they're expecting another GLOF, a glacial lake outburst, to collapse. There's like 33 at risk, and they're going through like 46, 47 degrees temperatures. So we're on the cusp of another one of those massive floods through Pakistan. But are you changing your thoughts on it? Some of the scientists that are talking about AMOC, they're bringing it much closer now. So just before we keep going with the El Nino.
I mean, the AMOC is a very important part of the system. It's the global thermohaline circulation, which transports a lot of heat, nutrients through the oceans and oxygen. And if it would stop, it would be a huge system change that works on the planetary level that would impact the whole system. So it's very, very problematic. That's without question. But let's say if the AMOC would collapse really though early, or let's say maybe in 5 years, this would be just an indication of how sensible the system reacts to change. Though the AMOC wouldn't be the only one. So our main problem is that the sensitivity of the system towards the increase in greenhouse gases is much higher than we thought. And the sensitivity is expressed in how the dynamical systems of the Earth are reacting to the warming. Dynamical systems are mostly currents and vortices in the oceans and the atmosphere, but also snow cover, soil moisture, gradients over the continents, melting events over the ice shields and stuff like that. So if the AMOC would collapse so early, this would just mean the whole system is collapsing much faster than we thought. So the collapse of the AMOC would be just another indication that we are in real trouble. And so this makes the AMOC not the main problem. Not the AMOC is collapsing. The whole biophysical Earth system is collapsing now. And that is the story. So the AMOC is a distraction from the real story. And I'm not convinced that the AMOC will collapse so soon, but I'm not certain of it for sure, because the question is how fast the warming will accelerate, how far the melting will progress. So all these things can speed up fast, which is now very clearly shown by the prospect of a super El Nino, because it really changes the dynamic of the whole system, speeds it up. And in the past, El Ninos were part of natural variability. So El Ninos were increasing temperatures, La Ninas were decreasing it. But now El Ninos becomes so strong and so frequent, and La Nina is not anymore able to reduce temperatures so much that the changing El Ninos are contributing to the acceleration of temperatures, which means they're not anymore part of natural variability, but a part of forced variability. Thereby, they become a feedback of global warming, which is best expressed by the super El Nino, which we could now get. So that's And that's the point. The whole system is the problem, not the end.
Yeah, and that's part of the media coverage issue that we've been facing. All right, so when it comes to the El Nino, we've got Bradley Warwick Brown. I don't know if you guys know him. The compounding point is obviously the impact of the El Nino, but then there's also the other impacts of geopolitics, war, fertilizer shortage, and all that sort of stuff. And we're going to get into that. But before we do that, we've seen this extreme supercell season that's just coming in and landing in the US at the moment. What are the sort of impacts that we're going to be expecting to see around the world? I mean, I presume people in their own country understand what an El Nino impact is on their country. I know in Singapore we're going to get drought. I know in Australia we're going to get drought and we're going to get fires in some places and floods in others, because that's what happens in the past. But what's your sort of perspective on that?
I read an article on an interview with Gavin Schmidt, one of the leading climate experts out there, and he said that we cannot be sure anymore of the historic teleconnections, so the connections between the system we know of, because the teleconnections inside the system are changing. This means, in terms of El Nino, we have no really an idea what the effects will be, because first it's the heating pattern. We don't know which heating pattern it will evolve, which impacts how the atmosphere reacts. If you have more warming in the Central Pacific or more in the Eastern Pacific, or a long warming stretch all the way to Australia, we don't know. So this depends. So depends how the El Nino will develop. This determines the effects in the atmosphere. And then we have zero experience what a super El Nino concerns. So super El Ninos are new. We never observed one, so we don't know what the effects will be. We know principle the effects, that's for sure, but not the spectral pattern and where will happen what. What we observe is the whole circulation becomes more chaotic. This means west-east flows and east-west flows get increasingly disturbed, and you get more north-south air mass movements, which creates much more chaotic temperature and pressure gradients in the system, and abnormal movements of waste masses of air in the system. And these abnormal movements of large air masses can impact each region in a highly abnormal way. This means just El Nino leads to massive drought and heat wave in the region does not mean that you will drown in the course of 2-3 days. Just doesn't mean that it won't happen. So you have the chance of anything. And then comes, though it's very important to understand what El Ninos do. El Ninos take out heat from the oceans via evaporation. This water vapor then condenses in convection, and the energy of the water vapor via condensation is released to the atmosphere. This creates upper level, high energetic air streams with a lot of energy inside. And these air streams move poleward and descend in high pressure systems. And it's these systems where you get very hot surface temperatures, cloud declines, the whole atmospheric air column gets very hot, heat domes. And this means the spectral window for outgoing long wave radiation becomes wide open in these regions, where outgoing long wave radiation increases to exceptional values. This means during El Ninos, you have regions where extreme precipitation intensifies and produces or sets more energy free and releases it into the atmosphere, and the atmosphere channels this energy into these hot and dry regions, which heat up. So you have, on one side, you have expanding hot and dry zones during El Ninos. On the other side, you have contracting and intensifying precipitation extremes, also in the form of mid-latitude storms, mid-latitude floodings. This means the increase in kinetic energy in the atmosphere does not stop at the tropics. It moves on and affects mid-latitudes all the way to the Arctic. And this means the whole low and high pressure system intensifies during El Ninos, but not as a general rule. You not really know where intensifies what, when. It always highly variable, the weather's system of Earth. But you know that extremes will intensify to a high degree, depending on the region, on an event-based level. But Super El Nino, and also very important to understand, you had this Timmermans study. I think it was a study which had voiced its fear that in the future El Nino could stronger oscillate with La Niñas. And both El Niños and La Niñas would oscillate stronger with other climate modes. Climate modes are often coupled ocean-atmosphere systems. This means the Pacific climate or circulation coupled stronger with the Indian Ocean circulation, and they couple stronger with the mid-latitude circulations, and all oscillating to a higher level. And this stronger coupling between the climate modes could reach new levels during a super El Nino. Though also there we have no experience in how far pressure centers will mutually reinforce each other in addition to upper level and lower level flows. So the whole circulation system in the atmosphere would become more energetic, but to what extent and where you have the most extreme amplification processes, we will see. And also the problem is ocean currents in the oceans also accelerate during El Niños. For example, in the Pacific, they do it poleward, in the western part of the Pacific. And you have a marine heatwave intensification signal in other basins. El Niños are strongly coupled with the Indian Ocean basin mode. This means you get an El Niño, and then you get, during the event, the Indian Ocean going hot. You get tropical oceans going hot. You get maybe North Atlantic Ocean going hot. You get maybe North Pacific Ocean going hot, depending on season. Also, Southern Hemisphere oceans are running hot from time to time. And these signals could also intensify during this El Nino. But I think it will not happen to such an extent because ocean heat uptake into the upper 100 meters in 225 was, they lost heat, a lot of heat. And normally we would need a heat accumulation, especially in the upper 100 meters. But El Niños transfer heat into the upper 100 meters, but mostly in the Pacific, but also in other parts it happens. But we have a massive heat increase in 2025 in the 100 to 300 meters range. It's quite large, the increase, but which was negated by the loss of the upper 100 meters. So it does not seem that the system will synchronize to such an extent. We saw it in 2023, 2024, when all the other ocean basins went hot with El Nino, because it should happen now. But we have no experience with the Super El Nino, and we have no experience that it cannot happen during the event and fully synchronize and fully produce a large jump. So we are in new territory now. We can just watch. I don't think it will happen. Because from the ocean heat perspective and from the current warming rates in the oceans, it should have started 1 or 2 months ago. Ocean temperatures going hot, and then the air temperatures following. This is not happening until now, but maybe it happens now. So, but we are not certain of anything anymore. The only thing we are certain, the pot in the game is massively piling up, and so, and the Earth system has a better class for now. So.
Right. No. So it's interesting. I'll give you a screen break, and then I'll ask the guys if they've got any questions. But one of the conversations you and I had on LinkedIn, you shared something, and you mentioned to me that you were talking about the different weather systems and how they interact, and you mentioned to me that we're moving into a positive Indian dipole, and that's obviously something we're very familiar with out here in Asia. It's at least the term, not what it does, but. What does that mean impact-wise? I mean, there's so much uncertainty. I'm just trying to see where we can find at least some certainty.
From the scientific discussion, what we observe is that strong positive Indian Ocean dipole events couple stronger with El Niños. And this is quite obvious in the time data. For example, during the strong El Niños, normally you have a strong Indian Ocean dipole. one thing Indian Ocean deep holes are doing, they increase the latent heat release into the atmosphere. They contribute an additional heating of the atmosphere. During El Niños, tropical intensifying convection heats up the whole troposphere air column, also the upper troposphere. Though the air column in the tropics heats up and expands in a way, but also dry zones expand. And what positive Indian Ocean deep holes are doing, they increase the latent heat loss to the atmosphere, though the warming effect of El Niños. They also increase or contribute to the basin, Indian Ocean basin mode. They favor a warming of the Indian Ocean in the course of events. And also this means tropical sea surface temperatures reach maximum values during El Niños, because in studies happened also 2023, 2024, surface temperatures slow down, surface winds slow down during El Niños across the tropics in a relative sense. And so positive Indian Ocean deep holes connection with El Niños increase the global effects on extreme events because you have more convection, more heat release, and they intensify the reaction of the Indian Ocean. And I think they can prolong also El Niños, but here I'm not quite sure. But there's also connection that Indian Oceans, depending on when the deep hole have which signal, can support El Niños or support La Niñas. And positive Indian Ocean deep holes can support El Niños because they're couple stronger. So I guess it was also supporting El Niños. Indian Ocean deep hole, though, if we see during this El Niño building up a strong positive Indian Ocean deep hole developing, this happens during winter, we will see it starting in some month. If this happens, it's another indication we get a strong El Nino and a strong temperature jump with strong extreme event increases. So just adds to the stack of points.
Yeah. So keep an eye out for that. Right. Who's got questions? David? I can guarantee David's going to have a question. I haven't asked Joe yet.
I was going to say, just listening in, right? I think what's interesting for me is you're speaking with such familiarity of everything, right? I still don't know what El Nino is. I just know that it's a big thing. I don't know how it represents itself. Is it a weather? Is it a weather or climate phenomenon? Is it the actual currents that make El Nino, or is El Nino the season? I'm actually also unsure about what makes a super El Nino, because we're speaking of it right now. As long as we're talking about it like Godzilla is coming, and everyone knows what Godzilla does. I don't. I'm trying to understand why it was El Nino then, and why is it a super El Nino now. I don't have those things. I'm trying to understand where and how it all works. Is it about just the currents, or is it the entire phenomenon is called El Nino?
I explain it. It's El Nino is a climate mode. Climate modes are essentially coupled upper ocean atmosphere circulations. This means upper ocean and the atmosphere work together to produce nonlinear effects on nonlinear buildups. And with El Nino, it's La Niñas and El Niños is oscillation. They oscillate between the two. One leads to the other, and the other leads back to La Niñas. And El Niños are a discharge event of heat. In the Western Pacific, heat builds up under the surface over the first 300 meters. And this heat accumulation under the surface is during El Niños transported to the East Pacific. This happens via wind forcing at the surface, which trigger internal ocean waves, which move this warm water to the east. And this warm water moving under the surface, which accumulated in the previous years, to the east is huge from an energy perspective, 3,500 times more energy density than air. So this hot, deep subsurface water. This moves to the east and then upwards in the eastern Pacific and across the equator. This hot upper water leads then to a strong precipitation or convection increase over the tropical Pacific. This means huge amounts of water evaporate, which draws out the heat from the oceans. And this creates this large amounts of convection and condensation, which sets free the energy into the atmosphere. Because you have evaporation, water vapor, and condensation gives back the energy which was needed for the vaporization. So El Niños discharge energy from the oceans, which had been previously accumulated to the atmosphere. And this then leads to a heat content increase in the atmosphere that has global reach. We speak about very large numbers, and this makes El Niño so problematic. And the super El Niño, just a prospect, because I'm not sure that the super El Niño will happen, and I hope it won't happen, is this amount of subsurface heat. So we have exceptional amounts of subsurface heat accumulated, and this means that a super El Niño is possible suddenly. But it not means that it will certainly happen, because the atmosphere has a large say into it. So it's still a question how much of it will upwell to the surface, how much will release to the atmosphere. But just that so much heat accumulated in the equatorial Pacific, that's the main story. Not a super El Niño, that's just clickbait. But actually, it's good that it brought to the public awareness, because there's a real possibility. So it's not a clickbait without reason. And this is so El Niños discharge heat. And they lead to the system to lose heat to space. So during global warming, the energy imbalance of Earth increases, means the whole system accumulates heat. And from time to time, it discharges larger amount to space, because it has to cool. As a body is heating, it has to emit more heat to its surroundings. And Earth does it via its oscillation systems, which suddenly peak and release more heat to space. And this is what El Niños do from a thermodynamic perspective.
But the CO2 in the atmosphere is also stopping the release of the energy into space, right? Which is the reason it's getting warmer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's a bit different. That's actually a bit. I mean, basically, if you think about what happens when you get into a bath, water sloshes backwards and forwards. So the Earth system is one big, body of water, so it sloshes backwards and forwards. But if you ever get those moments where you fill your bath up with hot water, kind of, initially in your bath tap is at the front of it, kind of thing, and then you put cold water on, then your hot and cold water is in actually different places, and you probably felt those before. And so what happens is that the heat itself can move around, can slosh about in that way too. The whole thing. So everything is constantly sloshing backwards and forwards in the oceans, and that's what the AMOC and all of those things are. That's what the term of all those dipoles are. They're just sloshing backwards and forwards, and it's either the salinity, the amount of water, salt in there, that's sloshing backwards and forwards, or is the temperature that's sloshing the backwards and forwards, and the temperature means the heat in there. And if you think about the Earth and you look at it, the biggest body of water is over in that Pacific. So the Atlantic is a narrow channel, but the Pacific is a big body of water. So that's where a lot of that sloshing backwards and forwards goes. And of course, that big body of water, the Pacific, kind of moves across into the Asian oceans and so on, that you then get, and you get all those things coupled along. And you get the equator all the way through, and you get all the heat that accumulates in those ways. So El Niño and La Niña are the events of the heat sloshing backwards and forwards as a result. And a super El Niño is where you get a lot of that heat than the normal that you get. Now, these are the modes that you have. They're kind of the big current, the big type of behavior that you can get. What happens then is how that affects you is through the normal bits of weather that you have. And the normal bits of weather is the way in which all this dissipate back into your life. So if you get something like a big switch in a mode, it's like suddenly suddenly finding, we've got the World Cup coming up, right? So different teams play in different styles. The Brazilians is very fluid. The French basically just sit back and have this solid defense, and then they look for the opportunity. The Germans kind of keep pressing forward and do that, and the British, God knows what the hell the English do. In that way. So if you're used to playing in one of these different modes, being in one of those things, and it suddenly switches to another, you're in trouble. You get lost. You don't know how the reactions of the players and things would be. If you're in one of those modes and the mode gets to be stronger, then you get more pressure at every pressure point, and you get more kind of weakness at every one of those points. You're being tested more, but is the weather pattern you're used to, but you're just getting more extreme of it. But when the mode switch, your whole weather patterns is not what you're used to anymore. You come from being like the UK, where you say, oh, well, it's just a lot of rain and grey sky, to suddenly finding you get intense heat and drought. And the country is just not built for that. And that's the problem when you have these events that switches the modes. And the problem with the Super El Nino, as Jan's describing, is you have all this energy being shifted, and it's actually shifting the modes. That's why it's such a big problem. That's why you can't really predict what's going to happen, because you don't know what it's going into. It's not like football where, the Brazilian team somehow got a German coach, more likely the other way around, and you can kind of anticipate what kind of coach, what kind of style they may now play. But is that, you don't know any of that information. You just go on the field, and it's different. And you now have to kind of say, well, what can I do? How can I deal with that? And if you just kind of think that, you can behave exactly the same as what you used to before, then you're going to find all the pressures are coming in the wrong way.
So can I ask? So the ENSO system, which is what it is, so the La Nina neutral El Nino, right? And so the sloshing back and forth thing, I get it, but isn't the difference? La Nina sort of pulls the energy in and stores it, and El Nino releases it, and it goes from one to the other. So it's not like the AMOC that takes 1,000 years to go around the Earth. It's a back and forth. But isn't it the winds? The winds that are changing patterns around the world, isn't that what turns them back and forth?
So the AMOC is a deep water system. The water goes down into the bottom of the oceans. It goes around and it's basically pushed down because it gets heavier, kind of versus lighter. So it's the salty content in that way, and it pushes water all the way through, and it takes like 1,000 years, and it churns up all the stuff at the bottom of the oceans or stores it back down, and so on. As Jan was saying, El Nino and La Nina is on the surface. It's that interaction between surface and air. And air on the oceans is wind. It's the trade winds. It's the strong wind patterns. And it was noticed back in 1600s, kind of the time when the Europeans were sailing across the world. And noticing the temperature and the wind patterns having these sort of oscillations, these sort of patterns that it was finding out. So they affect different sides in that way. And of course, the shorter term stuff kind of the heat really is that big issue, because that heat affects the amount of water in the air. The amount of water in the air affects the amount of water in our homes. It comes back down. What goes up comes back down. The humidity and all the rest of it. And you talk a lot about that kind of heat index, right? The humidity component to add on to the temperature component.
Yeah.
So that exchange of heat from the surface of the oceans, that's a few hundred meters surface. That's a lot of heat. Basically, a big kettle full that's warming up, or the radiator, with the air through rain, through humidity. So that becomes a big issue, because humidity is what we live off, is the rain that we have, is the water we have, that we end up back in our soil and all the rest of it. All that comes from the oceans. All that comes from this sort of, El Nino, La Nina type oscillations. ultimately. There's a base level of that it kind of governs. And when you get these super events, you get responses that gets, it's like having a friend who you very party with, and one day comes along and starts whacking you with a baseball bat. You
Nice.
don't know how it's going on.
I don't have friends like that.
Or you're about to find one. It's called our oceans.
That's true. All right, Jan, what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts?
I mean, El Niños are like the precondition that warm water accumulates in the Western Pacific, and if you have enough warm water accumulated, El Niños can happen. And for that, you need wind regimes to change, or it's called Western wind bursts. This is, for example, tropical depressions coming from the Indian Ocean, Madame Julian Oscillation it's called. They move from the Indian Oceans to the Western Pacific, and they produce a western wind burst. This means air that moves from the west to the east or the surface. They trigger Kelvin waves, and they deepen the thermocline, and that leads to this warm water movement at the subsurface to the east. And so it's an ocean preconditions the system, and the atmosphere triggers it. So like this, you can describe it. And the chance we have is stochastic wind forcing. It's the scientific term. This means short wind changes. They can prevent an El Nino still. Not prevent anymore. We will get anyway now an El Nino because we reached now anyway El Nino status. But it means if we get, for example, a strong eastern wind event, which happens in June 2014, it suppressed the El Nino development, and no El Nino was happening, or not a strong one, actually very, very weak one. But the next year, a very strong one happened because the heat was in the equatorial Pacific. So we have still the chance that no strong El Nino will happen. But this does not evaporate or removes the heat in the oceans. This means what the system tells us, we will get very strong El Niños very soon, possible 2026, the first one. And then we will see how the system reacts, because a lot of non-linearities are involved, where we cannot say really how the climate modes and how sea ice changes also. They can also be triggered by El Niños, dropping sea ice levels, how all will interconnect. So we can just watch. And the main problem is actually, or the main issue is, normally humanity should prepare now for a possible super El Niño in terms of food production. Supporting more farmers, providing more fertilizer, making it cheaper, making food prices cheaper. What do? Our system, and with all these egos out there, they produce a large war in the Strait of Hormuz, leading to oil and gas crisis, now fast oil and gas price increases, fertilizer price increases, farmers, they cannot produce any more food because they go out of business, and so on and so on. So we do the exact opposite of what we should do as a species. If we would prepare, no problem, we can cope. But if we do it like we do it now, we maximize the impact, social impact of this El Nino. If it gets in super El Nino, we are at the worst possible place we could be with this war with Iran, US, and Israel. Yeah. It's just unbelievable stupid.
Yeah, it certainly is. So Jan, so in the show sort of introduction, in the first paragraph, I sort of said, when we're paying attention to the media, me more than most, right? And I'm paying attention to how this is being talked about, and I just think for the average person, they'd just be looking at it going, well, what the hell? So from what I'm hearing you're saying is there's still no certainty that it is a super El Nino. Some of the scientific literature I've been looking at is showing the heat is very big and extensive, but until we know if it's going to be centrally or easterly released, we're not really going to know the impact. So what your message is just everyone calm down, get ready, prepare yourselves as well as you can, but try not to be overwhelmed by the news.
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
we are not in 7-7. Oh, depends who you are. I mean, if you are in a very precarious position, like lots of pure humans are on the planet, it's very, very bad. I mean, we have already 800 million people having not enough food. We have a hunger crisis. We have about 2 billion people with just coming by with their money. So though billions of us are in a very precarious situation, and for them it's very, very bad. And I would say, try as a community to assist each other, try to get active, try to get food help, whatever. Try to prepare as a community as good as you can do. Besides of that, normally we should help these people more with helps. And if you live, let's say, in a better situation, it can affect you for sure. Prices will go up. Maybe you have high food price spikes. You will have heat events. Maybe even we cross deadly levels in some places, but you have to escape then the heat. You get very extreme storms, flooding events, which can really affect you everywhere where you are. So you have, for not resilient communities or very vulnerable communities, try to prepare as good as you can do, are able to do it. And besides of that, be careful of the weather. Really watch the weather, what comes at you, because we have now these insane flooding events, insane heat events, and they won't become better during El Niños, and we don't know where the peaks will happen. So expect to be that it is rough, because one of the main problems is we had already non-linear intensification of extremes worldwide the last years. Studies still needed to really find out how strong signals are, but it looks really like non-linearity, and the system is already on the move. It's already destabilized, and inside it already destabilized system, already on the move, a super El Nino could happen with a lot of energy input into the system. That's just new territory. So we are now, as a species, deep in the red, and we should really react now. Because we don't know if we can in 10, 15, 20 years, if we are still able to mitigate it. Because adaptation we won't be able to do. Just to rebuild our whole infrastructure, all the water control measurements, all the building, the city, how they are organized, how they are structured. We would need to restructure and adapt our whole infrastructure to extremes, not of the ones today, not of the ones in 20 years, best in 100 years. This would mean you need a much stronger adaptation to extremes that will come to make it really good. But for this, we don't have even the sand. Where comes the sand from to make all this concrete? We don't have even the sand. So we are in a very dire situation. And in my opinion, we need to reduce greenhouse gases. If you apply the precautionary principle, because likely global warming could now spiral out of control, and possible super El Nino is as strong a signal as you can get to underline or to substantiate this argument.
Yeah.
I mean, what signals do we else?
I was going to say, David, but if we spend as much money and attention and effort on data centers, we might have a chance, right? David, do you want to?
I mean, I think you know, I had a thought earlier along that it echoes kind of a lot of what Jan's describing in a way. I think basically the point that Jans is bringing out is that climate change is not some average effect. You read the news and everything, it seems like it's some average effect. Gradually we get this, and then if we get to 1.5 degrees, then this sort of things may become like this, and so on. It's like what happens when the average impression of your car getting old is that it doesn't work as much, costs a little bit more maintained. The practical experience of your car getting old is that bits fall off, and then it doesn't work anymore, and then the bill suddenly gets to be really expensive, and that sort of thing. And that's the difference between thinking of it as an average effect, very much a kind of insurance type approach of saying, well, you know, we spend so much, we cover that, and that's what it is, to the practical reality. You only have one planet that we're living on. We live along one timeline, not the simulations of 10,000 different timelines. We live along one timeline. Along that timeline, you're going to experience these changes, these dramatic mode changes. And the whole issue of the Super El Nino is not that it's a Super El Nino, is that it may just be one of these mode changes. If it does, it completely changes. So it's no longer that average effect. You're now in a country which used to be, whether that's like this, is now completely different like that.
Yeah.
That's what happens with it. So you need to be a lot more flexible in your mindset. You need to embrace the fact that actually your comfort zone is now a discomfort zone. If you try to keep it as a comfort zone, which is what the climate change story is, how we can just change the energy to green and then we can stay in our comfort zone and everything will go on fine, you're going to find yourself entirely caught up, because you're going to be in, you're not going to a discomfort zone as we usually do and saying, I'm moving to, you know, a different country to live. I'm going to learn a new language and stuff, and that's my active approach to a discomfort zone. You're going to be in the discomfort zone because where you live is going to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Without you moving.
And the stuff that you think you need to live a good life is going to be gone anyway, right?
Well, whether that's gone or not, it's actually more the case that even if they're there, and this is kind of Richard's comment from a few weeks back about what happens to your money, is you're not going to be able to find the use that you imagine you can make with it. So even if you stock up on all your money, you think this will protect me in that and that and that way, you're going to find that actually those are no longer choices that you will have.
Yeah.
You know, the Michelin star restaurant you're hoping to go to will be shut. Even if you have the money, you can't go to it. So that's the discomfort, is that things are taken away. So if you rely a lot on that sort of security of what you can have, rather than in a sense, kind of a, again, one of the things that was said before, you know, kind of that preparedness. It's in the name, change, climate change, you know, change is in the name.
Yeah.
So
I'm just going to, Richard and Joe, have you got any thoughts?
Oh, plenty.
Well,
Still
I don't have.
processing.
Richard first.
I'm okay. Richard, yes. Age before beauty. Okay, go ahead.
I mean, what you're describing, I think people have a quite strong sense of in general, but they obviously are not qualified on a technical level to express it the way you are doing. I'm probably in that group, and I see the economic impact before I see the environmental impact. But to me, it sounds like you have moved the timeline significantly closer than what is commonly being discussed in the news and the debate, where we're talking like, yeah, if you're my age, bit hot, occasional flooding, but essentially if you're pushing 60, you're going to be fine, because by the time you're checking out, you're still going to be in a planet that is clearly habitable in a fairly pleasant way if you got some economic means. But to me, it sounds like you're talking timelines of just a couple of years.
Yeah.
Let's say the possibility exists.
Yeah.
I would say unlikely, but for sure in the next 10 to 20 years, be certain of it.
Yeah.
That's not so many nonlinearities popping up, so many accelerations, so many surprises, so many new predictions, just unbelievable. So expect at latest in 20 years that our globalized economy will collapse, because it's not the warming per se, it's how the system reacts, how extremes intensify. And we made a mistake. In the past, we thought extremes intensify because of mean warming levels going up. Was a huge mistake. What we observe now is global warming provides the baseline for stronger, more extreme extremes, which intensify downstream events. This means the first intensification of climate change, of extremes, just allows downstream events to become even more extremes. And what we observe now is mutually amplification chains between extremes that build up, produce an abnormal, insane event, and then crash down again. But this abnormal, insane event in intensity, area, extent, and persistent, or even how fast they build up and how fast they switch to another extreme, they create strong teleconnections in the form of mass and energy, which allow other systems or coupled atmosphere surface systems to really new astonishing peaks, which we did not have ever had before. This means heat waves that suddenly peak above values we never experienced before, 1 or 2 or 4 degrees. We have it now in the spring heat wave main thing, but maybe will also at one point happen with summer heat waves, we don't know. And we have it now with a drought intensity, with thirst waves. Is it called how the atmosphere gets very hot and the humidity decreases to very low levels, which pulls out all the moisture out of plants and soils. This allows large sudden increases in massive wildfires because you get such extreme dryness, which leads to these strong fire extremes we had in Canada and Australia. Amazon will follow for sure. Rainfalls will follow. You get these large wildfire increases. Will happen at one point. You get Arctic burning at one point, and all these things are interconnected. Like a strong El Niño, super El Niño could, for example, mean that in 2027, then it should be more affect the Arctic than now because not built up now. The summer sea ice in the Arctic will be lost, which could lead to a massive peak of Arctic burning peat soils and stuff like this. So this is straight clack, 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 clack. And you don't know how fast it can interconnect. So this means 5 years, possible 5 years, 10 years, I would say medium, that you are really in trouble with our global economy and with humanity and stabilization of our societies and stuff like this. And at best 20 years. And you cannot escape. You cannot escape.
No billionaire bunker. No billionaire bunkers, right? So, you know, I was just going to say, Joe. So I read a story this week in the glaciers that are melting in the Himalayas. The way they're melting, so they always interact with the rocks just because they rub back and forth across the rocks, and they pick up ions and all the things. And it goes, there's a couple of billion people relying on the water that comes from these glaciers. It's now melting so quickly, they believe it's going to change the pH of the water downstream. And just that as one of your examples, right? Just the amount of people that will be impacted by that. Because that means no drinking water, no agricultural water, but also all the life in the rivers will die if the pH changes. But Joe, you got a point on this, and I want to talk because I want us to move on to extreme heat. But Joe,
I was just going to say that, Lisa Maria, what's going to happen is we can't have nice things. I mean,
so we've got yeah, that's true. We've got Going South here, who's been joining us for a few weeks now. Jan, you guys go back. He's in Greenland. You guys go back, right? Going South.
What do you mean?
Going South. He's never told me his real name. He's in Greenland. He's joining us here. He's just saying, "I've made it here live." Yeah, you guys go back. He can tell you. He's never told me his real name. But I want to share with you one article that was in The Guardian that I thought was, I can't remember who wrote it, but I thought it was a really good example of what's coming. So, of course, drought, we're going to see drought impacts and what Jan was saying about the parts of the world that are really going to be struggling, because it's not just drought from the El Niño, it's also going to be drought from people just... No, the drought will be from that, but then the food supply chain shock, which is from the fertilizer shortages, and we're already starting to see that. So potential famine, starvation, suffering, wildfire risk, as you just mentioned. excess rainfall and flooding. So that is obviously going to happen if you've got a house in a flood zone. Get out of there. Higher coal use, and that's especially because of this war. We've talked about it before. They're turning the coal, you guys can explain it better, into liquid. More grid failure risk. I was just talking to the lady who's from the Philippines who cleans our house, and I was asking how her family back in the Philippines is getting ready. So they were talking about getting a generator. Electricity is astronomical. And I said, yes, get a generator, but also get solar panels. But at the same time, solar panels are at risk of being destroyed by the typhoons, and the typhoon season is expected to pump up. So I basically said, try and get both. Declining fish stocks, geopolitical risks, which we're already seeing, obviously more heat illness, heat stroke deaths, and higher civil conflict risk. And this is where populism will start to rise and people like Pauline Hanson start to become interesting to people. So don't do that. We don't need more dickheads leading us. We need smart, sensible people leading us. But anyway, Joe, anyone else want to sort of, because I want to talk about the heat before we move on. Anyone got anything else on El Niño? I'm sure we'll keep going on it in other ways, but thoughts?
Well, I think we could, I want to bring one thing up, which is the way modeling is done. And I think it's kind of Jan pointed to in that way. Most modeling of complex problems is done in bits. So you have some sort of assumption of kind of an average dynamics which helps you to go forward, and then you may look at what can go on as an extreme there, and then you carry on in that way. So there's a kind of bias towards the world, because if you think about actually trying to simulate out the scenarios in everything and the consequences of what it is, it just kind of diverges in ways that you cannot really manage, or you cannot figure out how to do it. So that's what happens as a result of what you have in that way, and that's how in that way what's happening today. When we look at what's actually happening, is our models inevitably underestimate. They underestimate in the sense that the paths where things go well, we're already living it, and so that's our norm. So we're not going to get better because of the changes. And the paths that go badly, we're not living it, but we're not actually accounting for them sufficiently in our modeling, because our modeling is basically biased by an average, which is kind of based off what we think kind of our experience and things are, without the consequence of the cascading extremes that go on. And that kind of underlies a lot about how policy responses and those sort of things are. And the actual lived experience becomes very different from that. So I think that goes again to this part. So can we curb it? Can we deal with it? Is there something we do and so on? Well, you kind of have to do something like that. I think it's really interesting. The last fund that Richard and I were together in, it was Asian trading, Japan trading. And the traders became very successful because it believed tomorrow was worse than today, and the day after is going to be worse than that. And that's how it became really successful. And today, our pitch, if you listen to the politicians, is how tomorrow is going to be better than today, and the day after will be even better.
Yeah.
Gap. That's that mentality gap. That's the preparation gap. Because of that preparation gap, you're going to find yourself completely unprepared. And that's how you're not able to adapt, not able to change. Yeah,
and the confusing messages that keep coming out. So one of the things I really wanted to talk about was extreme heat, right? Because obviously that's a big thing. So I'm just this week, Reuters released a climate monitor which measures temperature. So one of my frustrations around all of these things is that they measure one thing. And they should measure everything. Like if we really want to get an idea of what's going on, we should be able, we should by this point have some data where we can look at fire risk, flood risk, heat risk, all of it, all in one place, but we still don't. But anyway, I thought this was quite interesting. So it's been incredibly hot out here in Singapore, and for anyone who's visited Singapore before, people will say, but it's always hot. It's not. There's hot seasons. There's like sort of April, May, and then October, November. It's traditionally it's a bit uncomfortable, but you learn to deal with it. But it's been hot, and there's no relief, right? Going out for a walk, I just come back completely soaked, right? It's not pretty, but this map basically shows that Singapore has been 2 degrees Celsius above average for this entire year so far. And I thought that was kind of interesting, right? So I think most of us out here in this part of the world, we're already feeling that it's already much hotter. So for me, I mean, obviously we've been seeing what's going on in India and Pakistan, Bangladesh, Vietnam's just been having some heat extremes a few months back. We had the other parts of Asia that were going through some really scary heat extremes. So, 51.1 was the highest I saw in this place called Dadu in Pakistan, but they're sort of 46, 47 degrees. The grids are falling over. The water's evaporating. They're in really bad shape, and that's just what we're learning. So they're always trying to talk about why, and the Carbon Brief put out another explaining, and they put what was that, the Hunga Tonga eruption as one of the reasons, and yet other scientists said actually that cooled the earth a little bit. So what is it? It's the sulfur from the shipping lanes. It's the last El Nino. Have you got any answers for me here, Jan?
I think those things from what Jan said, the heat is baked in, it's in the oceans already.
Yeah,
those things are
but that's not coming up. So
those things are like little postage stamps that you stick on the envelope. You think that's from that's what you stare over, but the content of the envelope is the heat that's already baked in. Yeah, it's already there. That's what's going to slosh around.
And we're about to see a big fat burp popping out, right?
Burping events in that way. And what happens, what the last comment I've made along is all our efforts are still contributing to adding more heat. And, when people talk about, the renewables and how amazing all this is and so on, we are using 104 million barrels of oil a day with the Gulf War in that way. Production is increasing in other places.
Yeah.
The blip is going to take the reason why oil is not $200 is because people pricing production will come. They're not pricing a demand destruction that keeps it down and you won't see it going up. They're forecasting the same demand. They just actually see more production that you can manage outside of the Gulf of Hormuz. And so everything we do as an economy and as a people, as governments, not people. People genuinely want to do different, but governments are pushing for more in that way. You mentioned the AI data centers. Which country is not advocating as a government that we need to have our own AI data centers?
No, you definitely do, just from a data sovereignty perspective, right?
In the world is advocating we shouldn't have our own AI data centers.
Yeah. But Jan, so because we saw the other thing that we saw this week, of course, is that the Antarctic temperatures have climbed 15 degrees above normal, and it's wintertime in the Antarctic. So, from your perspective, from everything that you're seeing, what do you see as the reason? Obviously, the oceans are at the core of it. But
let's take this article from Carbon Brief from Secker Hausvater. Secker Hausvater is one of the leading climate scientists out there, as a modeling climate scientist, a statistical climate scientist, maybe we can say. And he's one of the leading voices of climate science because he plays down global warming, the effects. That's the reason he's one of the leading voices. Because, for example, James Hansen was most of the strongest warners. He was warning all the time. That's the reason he never became one of the leading voices of climate science. So one precondition, no. This we have to know about Secker Hausvater. And it's not. He's just conservative. It's not that is intentional or that he's a bad person or something. No. It's just he's a conservative scientist, and he is very deep into models. But the discussion is really now well developed. What we know, what happened during this temperature jump 23-24. We understood this jump now. And first thing, 3-year triple dip La Nina was accelerating rates of ocean heat uptake with preconditioned the system for the jump. Then we had from 2022 to 2023 October a large decline of low-level clouds. This increased the radiation from the sun onto the surface oceans. So the surface oceans accumulated additional energy before this jump. And this clouds declining over the oceans also preconditions the system and triggered lots of marine heat waves during this time. Also thinking that SOX may be not too much involved, because it does not produce sudden jumps 2 years later after the reduction, especially that cloud cover increased after October 2023, again, largely. It's an oscillation with low-level cloud cover. And it's ENSO-related, this SST pattern effect. But so you had acceleration heat uptake in the first 3 years before this El Nino. You had reduced cloud cover for 2 years, peaking during the peak ENSO period. And then you had the heat transfer from the lower oceans into the upper 100 meters during the El Ninos, and also upper ocean heat content increase in the 3 years preceding this El Nino. Then you had this big discharge of heat during the El Nino. It was not only, it was a weak and moderate El Nino in the eastern and central Pacific from the heat discharge perspective, but in the western tropical Pacific, rates went massively up, and also in the Caribbean Sea, heat discharge massively increased during this time. So you got other regions that joined the heat release in the oceans, not only the El Nino. It was special El Nino actually from the heat release pattern. It was a new kind of El Nino from this perspective, if you add the other region being part of this discharge event. And then you had sea ice losses around Antarctica, which contributed to the warming. You had storm intensification in the Southern Hemisphere and cloud declines there also because of sea ice. This also contributed to heat release. You had ocean surfaces running hot over most of the oceans in 2023, 2024. They contributed also, though the ocean surface component of surface air temperature increase made a large jump during 2023, 2024 to new record levels. Then you had for sure Honga Tonga and you had SOX also as a reason, but they come after actually. So you had a lot of feedbacks amplifying. You had also poleward warming intensifying during these events, also in 2024, also contributed to this jump. So it was a synchronization event of feedbacks that triggered this jump, prepared by previous ocean heat uptake acceleration and a period of very low cloud cover, which increased sun radiation into the ocean. So it was like a mix of several things. And you had expanding dry and hot zones during the El Nino, which also lead to declining cloud cover over the continents. Amazon drought 2023, 2024, we had large reductions in cloud cover because of this extensive drought. So all these factors contributed to this jump in air temperatures during this time. And Honga Tonga also, maybe yes, maybe not, it's controversial, discussed.
Yeah.
And Second House father just but most of it he leaves out because he knows these studies. It's interesting actually that he does not address them. But
Well, he's not going to get any mini coverage if he does, right? That's that's the point. I think people need to sort of be paying attention to.
1 year goes fully alarmistic and he's out. I bet.
Yeah.
Then this thing starts, like the countermeasures to quiet down this voice, because there's not any discontent is not wanted. Like humanity gets excited. This is not wanted. It's sad because in a way capital destroys itself by it, because capital won't survive accelerating, spiraling out of control global warming. That's just a matter of fact. Even the risk assessment institutions for the financial markets now realize global capitalism could collapse because of global warming. It's now more and more coming to the surface. It's not just me. It's a lot of voices now starting. No?
But make sure you invest in your SpaceX IPO, right? So, David.
I want my own space.
My bid's in already.
You have one.
And I mean, I think this is relevant because is not the only one in that way, right? I think that if you follow the more recent sort of discussions about climate change and things, there's a lot that says the extremes are now no longer what we need to fear. So Bill Gates, for example, kind of says it's more we need to focus on how we can help people. It's not climate change, it's no longer the issue. We're on track now, and they're all based on the idea that electrification is all you need to do. In that respect, they're all based on the idea that if you moved away from having petrol and diesel cars to having electric cars, then you're going to be fine. And given that we're on the way to that, we're going to be okay. So what they're saying is that the continued accumulation of heat, the continue in the oceans, and continue kind of consequences of those sort of modal changes that may be in there, on average doesn't matter, because there are enough scenarios on average which is still okay to counter for the fact that there are lots of scenarios where it's not okay. So on average, your life will be fine.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the problem, because you don't live on average.
And Earth does not function through averages. Yeah.
Exactly. Going South said they retired cascading tipping points. I haven't read that yet. I'll have to have a look. Have you heard that, Jan?
What do you mean? What was the name?
They
Yeah, that's basically the same thing. Tipping points.
That IPCC report taking away the extremes, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there was the last card. The IPC could play down global warming. Was the last card they had. And what they did is, per definition, it's scientifically fully correct. Human emissions do not follow the worst case trajectory anymore. So this is out. We do not increase more. But maybe with data centers, who knows? But still, technically, it's okay to remove the highest emission scenario. But the highest emission scenario is also the warming you get. And if we include now what we know about the feedbacks and observations and the recent signals that pop out, it's very, very stupid to remove the worst case, because we are now likely in the worst case. We cannot even assess anymore how worse it will be. Just for example, while they removed the most extreme emission scenario, human emission scenario, we had in 2024 this massive peak in greenhouse gas and CO2 increases. Before, the maximum had been maybe 2.7 parts per million, ppms, but then we had 3.7. It jumped by 1/3, something like that. We had to jump by 1/3 in the atmospheric increase. So the Earth's system does not measure our emission. It functions while the increase is in the atmosphere. It does not care for our emissions if it emits itself too much greenhouse gases. And this is the problem. We have now likely a collapsing terrestrial carbon sink. If we take the signals seriously, we have a plateauing, or likely, possibly even a sinking carbon sink of the oceans, while ever more systems increase their emissions. I mean, that's one of the reasons the sinks are declining. And this jump in 2024, just this example, is the task that could respirations, microorganisms that degrade organic matter. So this jump could have been the result of hot and wet conditions, abnormal hot and wet conditions, or abnormal hot and dry conditions. Both increase respiration, microbial respiration, and there are two studies. One hot-wet was it, other hot-dry was it, and both will it be, but to what extent? And the increase in microbial respiration had been 4.5 gigatons of carbon this year, abnormal peak, 4.5. Our own emissions are 10 gigatons per year carbon. So half of our emissions, roughly. So just microorganisms in 1 year peaked by that. And just this signal tells us we are not even able to estimate how much natural emissions the system is able to produce if just microorganisms can produce in 1 year such a jump. But it's all not clear. It will show the future discussion. But we also have now a new estimates from carbon emissions from the Arctic. They come, it's something like by 500 gigatons CO2 equivalent till the end of the century in the moderate scenario. 500 gigatons CO2 equivalent. This is would mean at the end of the century, just in a moderate warming scenario, the Arctic produces maybe 1 to 2 gigatons of sea or 3 gigatons of sea per year. This is already just Arctic a runaway warming. Because in the past we had 10 times lower rates of greenhouse gas increases in the past warming phases of Earth. And if you add all these new findings with coastal marine heat waves and plankton blooms releasing methane, sargassum algae stranding on the coast releasing methane, you have no Arctic methane bombs likely possible. We have higher emissions from permafrost hydrates, under the permafrost likely. We have emissions from declining, retreating glaciers. We have possible emissions from microbial respiration peaking. We have possible emissions from burning forests worldwide with the rainforest leading the big carnage. So we have now so many discussed feedbacks inside the discussions that you just think, what is happening here? And we are on the brink to trigger a huge chain reaction. Possible, not certain. But if you apply the precautionary principle, we would have to act now. Because we don't know in how far they are right, how far they are overestimating, or in how far they may be even still underestimated. And actually we would have, as a species, to pump much more resources into the research, into the observation systems, into the evaluations of the signals we see, into the improvements of the models. Instead, what we're doing, we roll it all back. We destroy the observation systems. We destroy science funding. We try to corrupt more the EPCC in the report and stuff like this. It's just madness. And so I say capital destroys now itself. No chance. And very important, a bunker. All these rich people build now as an asset. They're not assets, they're traps. Bunker life can turn very fast into hell. And you cannot escape a collapsing biophysical system, no place to escape. Mars is stupidity, just lunatic. I don't know what happens with Musk. But also space hotels like Bezos. I mean, what's happening with these people? You want to live in a space hotel getting like, I don't know, jelly bones? I don't know how long it's nice on a space stations. We never tested it. After 10 years, you really feel bad. I mean, it's
just look at the super yachts in a dead ocean, right?
Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, on to that last bit, how long can you live in a spacecraft thing is, I can, Richard and I, we'll get along, we'll manage, but me and the company of Elon Musk and Bezos and Sam Altman, I think I'd rather not be there.
Yeah. All right, I'm just looking at time because
Indeed.
So when we first started, before we went live, Jan was saying it could take him 3 weeks, 6 hours a day to teach everything he knows. So we're trying to compress as much knowledge as we can. But I wanted to ask you one quick question, which is a bit of an aside. So when we were first sort of scheduled to speak, you posted on LinkedIn that China will become uninhabitable because of floods. And I thought that was fascinating. And I also, my theory on China and being friends with Russia is you want to stay friends with Russia because you're going to have to go north at some point. So, keep your neighbor happy. Do you want to talk about that?
Okay. I mean, I'm trolling China, actually. I'm trolling global capital. It's my fun project a little bit. But the problem is it's correct, unfortunately, because it's called the Indo-Western Pacific Ocean Capacitor. It's the climate mode that's responsible, that channels moisture from two ocean basins, sourced from two hemispheres into China. It's a constellation of intensifying high pressure systems and in the vicinity intensifying low pressure systems that end over fast warming oceans where you get these massive heat waves. So these things peak, they tend to peak. And what we observe now that increases in extreme precipitation are governed by one main variable. It's called moisture convergence. This means large streams of moisture are pumped into a region and accumulate in this region. And this then provides the possibility for sustained, massive, extreme precipitation over large areas. And what we see the last year, since 2020, that is Indo-Western Pacific Ocean Capacitor is becoming more active. And also it's becoming more active outside El Niño cycles. I mean, after Enzo, it becomes more active, but also this year it becomes active. They have now a lot of flooding, extreme flooding events. And the problem is with China is they have all this control water infrastructure. It means 20,000 dams and levees and all this stuff. And these extreme precipitation events, what they have now, that leads first, you have all this sediment flushed into these levees, reservoirs and stuff, though they with sediments, they fill up with sediments, so their efficiency is declining. Then they are not built for the rain increases, which are now happening, which will be non-linear, peaking in some years to abnormal, insane values. This means there will come the point where the whole water control structure and infrastructure of China will collapse in a cascading case of events. The interior gets flooded too much, too strongly, too fast. You get dam failures, which previously prevented extreme flooding or channeled other areas, which cascades downwards. All the dams, and maybe you get the Free George Dam in between. And also one example, like the whole topography goes now unstable. All these hill failures and mountain failures we have now. Extreme precipitation, the whole topography with the soils and the hilltops and slopes is not prepared for these amounts of precipitation. So it takes the Free Gorge dams with the reservoir, a large slope failure because of heavy precipitation. What happens with the dam? Schwab, it makes slosh over the dam and it goes very fast, then you get them a dam failure. So the whole thing is not anymore controllable. And China will be flooded by insane amounts of moisture coming from two ocean basins, from two hemispheres, synchronizing in a perfect event in one season with massive marine heat waves, non-linear intensifying evaporation of moisture, all inside China. This you can observe now, and you can just count it on 3 fingers that the whole thing will go bust. And then you get a China-wide infrastructure failure of energy production and stuff, blah, blah, blah. So the whole factory China comes to a standstill. So,
okay.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. That's a big one.
Maybe in 15 years, maybe in 5 years, Super El Niño will give us an idea how fast it goes. Because it's not
linear, right?
only in linear intensification of extremes intensifying other extremes. So you get these chains, blah, 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 and you get now these sudden peaks in systems. And this Indo-Western Pacific Ocean Capacitor is a system perfectly for such a peak. And yeah, I mean, maybe it does not happen. And I hope it will not happen. But if you apply the precautionary principle, we have to assume that it will happen. Because the increases happen now too fast, the impacts too fast, ocean heat increases too fast, super El Nino's coming too fast. I mean, what do we need?
Wow.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, and I want to ask you, when you give us the 5, 10, 15, 20 year time frame, are you being generous with 20 years? Do you think it really is going to be much sooner? Because I kind of feel like it is the big moment where we kind of cross over. But something else I want to ask you is what did we not ask you that we should have asked you? That's hot for you right now.
No, you surprised me with this question now. I mean, let's say like this. I addressed it before. The main thing we underestimated was the feedback reaction, or the emergent feedback reaction out of the dynamic systems that mutually amplify. We seriously underestimated it. And the amplification between the dynamic systems, subsystems of the Earth system is likely highly nonlinear because it already starts. And we are just at 1.3, 1.4 degrees. I mean, warming, but we could soon reach with another jump close to 2 degrees. So if it's really a nonlinear signal, we have to expect that the dynamical amplification between the systems in the atmosphere and the oceans and the aligning system of the continents and ice polar regions will become strongly nonlinear, likely exponential. That's the problem. And this we see now everywhere. Like the heat increase in Southeast Asia. I mean, it's just madness. Oh, what you faced there. It happens just in some years it intensified like that. Or how much, what you would say, Andrea? Or you all?
The first time I mean, 2023 was the first time that it alarmed me. And it's been more and more alarming ever since. And of course, being based out here, I'm worried about the poorest. And I'm always trying to do everything I can to try and reach out to, people live in tin shacks, and in this extreme heat. It kills me. I can't actually think about it too much because the suffering that is happening is so bad, and it's like and the rest of the world doesn't even know. They're not paying attention. Even in Asia, even in Singapore, they're not paying attention as much. But it's terrible. And it. This recent heat, it's probably knowing an El Nino is coming. This heat that we've been experiencing lately, I'm like, whoa, we're going to be all right. We probably will in Singapore.
I mean, if
the
you
rest
ask,
of the region.
If you go on.
I'll put it.
Actually, maybe Richard. I'm sure Richard's got a lot to say about what's been said. So Richard, go on.
No, but what consistently hits me, what I keep going back to again, because it's the only anchor I have in life, is what I've been doing in my career. And if you have spent your whole life managing risk, how we approach environment is not how you manage risk.
Yeah.
It's like, I think if I cut off the worst outcomes for my portfolio, I'm pretty happy because I know there will be opportunities to make money all the time. But there are certain paths and certain roads you do not travel down, because if I do that to the portfolio, I can actually blow up. And I'm never, ever going to put myself in a situation where I blow up, because that means I can't keep on playing the game. And I like playing the game. But that is how policymakers around the world are effectively feeding the populace with, we can keep on playing the game, but we don't need to cut off these venues that leads to potential disaster, because they're very unlikely to happen. If you have ever managed risk, be it personally or professionally, that's not how you approach it, because you will blow up.
Yeah,
I think the real challenge that we all face is the kind of thinking that goes along with, shall I pee in the pool? You know, it's really hard to
Is there thinking with that?
well, no, I mean this is kind of what I'm going with in terms of the challenge of thinking of thinking about something like this, because of the levers that we try to move or push, or they're not going to really result in big huge things. So the way my mind just jumped to it is basically how, when I was in school, I haven't been to a pool recently, so you'll be glad to know that. But it's something that you're gonna go like, as a small volume versus the entire pool, you don't really see that much happening. So I think there is and I could be projecting, but I think there is reasonable comfort in a lot of people just going in the pool. They don't realize that it's going to do very much. They don't see very much, not much of a big impact. But it's one of those things where, because it's a closed system, there is nowhere for filtration to go. It's all in the same system. What's happening? We're now in a room where, as the Earth is about to burp, the windows are closed. There's no getting out of it, right? So I think that's the kind of the two metaphors that we're kind of like building in my head, which is why it's an interesting place to be inside of it.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those stories that it reads like science fiction, and yet it's probably not. And it's one of those things where, as you listen to it, it sounds like the worst case scenario, and yet it's not. I mean, that's really what's kind of bizarre about the whole thing. As in, like, let's give you what's the middle ground in 20 years instead of the worst case scenario, right?
Yeah.
I think, I mean, just like as a conclusion, I think the only way humanity will be able to reverse what seems to build up, we will know in 5 years. In 5 years, we'll know how bad it really is. So the system will show us if we are really in the worst case. But otherwise, it will go fast then. And if this is really the case, we need humanity at its best, full potential. This means full education, full providing food, shelter, mobility, education, energy, tools, materials to all, though we can start to reverse and stabilize the Earth system. But for this, we need 8 billion people at its best, and capital has to finance it. Otherwise, capital is out. Very simple.
Yeah.
No chance. So we need, and if it's really this the case, we have to go all out with all we've got, with all our potential, because the knowledge holders are humans. If they die, if they have no possibilities, no abilities anymore, no life left, we lose all our knowledge. So this can happen fast. So we need to prevent collapse of our civilization. And if it really gets so bad, we will see it in the course of the next 5 years, I bet. And then we have to react with everything we've got. We have to reduce greenhouse gases as fast as we can do. We have to do massive solar damming to prevent the oceans to overheat. We have to prevent all these feedbacks to pop up, like methane hydrides coming up from permafrost. So we have to stop the rainforest from burning. We have to stop the Arctic from burning. We have to stop the oceans from collapsing into toxic microbial food webs, producing lots of biomass near the coast, also produce greenhouse gases. So we have a lot of work. And also the greenhouse gas, we have to remove greenhouse gas installations, massive scale. So that's the point. We need everything we've got. If it's really that worse, we will see. And this will be our responsibility of our life, to restore the living conditions on Earth if it's really so bad. I would say yes, I fear so, but hopefully I'm wrong.
So I don't think you're wrong, but I just sort of looking at the time. I don't know. I didn't ask you if you had more than 2 hours, Jan. But should we wrap up, David? Do you want to make a? I mean, why don't we have a quick final statement each? But first of all, I want to say thank you, Jan, for joining us. Now, tell me, when you're not doing this, what do you do to relax?
You see this in the corner? This one is my juggling stick.
Oh, nice.
I have here my free space. I can juggle in my room and gives me free time. It's a very nice moment because my whole mind is focusing on the point where the stick is turning, and such nice focusation. I love it. You're fully inside the point and do not realize anything else anymore.
Yeah. Going south, saying you're not wrong. Let's put it like that. I totally agree. You're one of the people that I listen to, and Jan's really active on LinkedIn. Someone I know shared you on Facebook, so I'm going to find you on Facebook. You're also on Blue Sky, and you know, I mean, you're speaking English as a second language. So first of all, really appreciate that, and you should never apologize for that, by the way, because I can't speak other languages. So I really appreciate the message you're putting out there. I appreciate the courage that you put it out there with. You're not bitchy. You don't get involved in all those fights and all the nonsense that I see going on. Who can be stuck with that, right? But you're just going for it. You're saying your truth. You're putting it out there. You're sharing the information that you're basing it on. And I think it's a privilege to listen to you. And I think I could tell from all four of us, we've all enjoyed it.
Very much.
Maybe shifted some opinions, but I want to give you something positive, and I'm going to share it now. So Nate Hagens is something. So I haven't got any other distractions. This is my distraction this week. And Nate Hagens has a channel called The Great Simplification. He should get you on it, Jan. And he had this guy on this week called Brett Khan, who's a regenerative change practitioner, and so I've got this belief. Like what you were saying, all these things that we need to do. He thinks that we're missing half of the story, which is regenerative, sort of regenerating the whole planet, right? And it's a really fantastic conversation. So when people sit here and listen to this and go, "There's no hope," there is hope, but it requires all of us together operating at the scale of the problem with the scale of the solutions. And we're not doing that, and we've never done that. And we've got all this bullshit, denial, Donald Trump. We've got all this bullshit around us, which is just taking our eye off where it needs to be. And also what you were saying, you know, who do we want to be as we move through this time? And right now, there's some very dystopian paths opening up for all of us, and it's going to be miserable for everyone. And all those young boys joining the manosphere, treating women like shit. That's going to be a really bad path for you. So we need to come together. I heard there's a femisphere now, right? We need to come together as a community, as a society, and do everything we possibly can to create a better future for our kids and our grandkids. And I think that's what we're all here for, right? So that's my conclusion, David.
I want to say, you know, the going back to what Richard was saying in terms of, you know, drawing back on his experience and so on, the one thing that part tells us is this idea of kind of having a portfolio that you can shift easily, having views that you're not kind of tied to and everything locked down into. And that's really going back to that individual person perspective and thinking about how you can have the agility to be able to rediscover how you can express what you are in different situations as what you are in that way. And that's basically, it's kind of how Richard has always traded along and how we've always worked in that sense, in that way. The aspect of relying on, say, the big system has got to change this, it's got to do that, it's never going to happen. You know, I agree, yeah, great, we do these aerosol and all those things, it's never going to happen. And it's completely, for me, focusing on that and pushing on that takes the energy away from just asking yourself, how do I actually get accustomed to this discomfort zone? how do I start thinking about what I am, the skills I have, and how that connects with other people so that I can have livelihoods. Livelihoods are going to be the key thing. If you have to rely on a defunct economy to be able to feel you can have a livelihood, you will never be able to do the thing that you need for you to actually move things forward. And finally, humanity is a collection of individuals that has complete different dynamics as a result of how they interact with each other. So how you interact with each other as an individual is part of what drives it, rather than how you think your government's going to be. This week, the riot in Belfast indicates one aspect of it. The other aspect of the resignation of the UK defense minister, and the comment from there is the mandate. The first purpose of a government is to, defend its own country. When you face global problems, the idea that each individual country's priority is to defend its own country is how you get messed up. That's how it's not going to work through the politics.
Yeah.
It's going to work through the people. So get to know someone far away from where you are, in a different country, whatever it is, get to appreciate how they live. Just have that one-on-one exchange with them. Start from there.
Yeah. And if you want to get a slightly more sort of open-minded world view, I'm going to put up my world news link here. World news, polycrisis.com. It's global news. It's not just local news. So the idea is we start to educate ourselves around the whole story. All right, Richard, Joe, do you want to say something?
No, I think we should leave it on that note, that each and every one of us is individual for the path we choose.
I was struggling to build a full metaphor around the peeing in the pool thing, but I think I'll have to leave that where it is.
Yeah, thanks for that image. All right, Jan, do you want to send us off with some final words?
John, also, it's all about us. We have to connect, we have to work together, we have to improve ourselves, we have to help others to improve, to reach the best. And I think our species will do it. We will survive, we will react, and hopefully it's not getting as bad as it looks, but we will see the next years. But I believe in my species, I believe in us. So I hope for the best.
Yeah, me too. I keep believing in the human spirit and get to work.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, and thank you.
Thank you all.
Guys.
Thank you so much for coming on board. It's been
really
massive pleasure having you here, and I've learned so much.
It was very nice to speak with you folks. I'm impressed. Wish you a good day.
Yeah. All right.
Thank
See you guys.
Thank you.
Everybody, thanks for watching.
Thank you.